fully employed in the real world, right? So you see a little bit of overconfidence in this realm. But then you lead to wisdom, worldly wisdom, where you're then able to apply those things to new things you've never been taught before, and really express that through your life. Eventually, you learn how to analyze, draw new connections, evaluate. In this world of, we realize it's not so black and white. Things are kind of rightish and wrongish. Arguments have merit, and they also have weaknesses. But in the aggregate of all those things, can I evaluate the best out of several good arguments? And that's the evaluate phase. But to get a doctorate in this world, you have to be able to synthesize new thought in that field. And that's that create level. And that's exactly what this committee did. They came to me, they said, hey, these are some of the things we're thinking about, and we crafted a narrative on leading with confidence that was different. We met about a week ago. We all said, hey, if we'd known that that's what we wanted to talk about first, we probably wouldn't have crafted this narrative, this framing of leading with confidence. But this is such a valuable one, and I'm glad to be able to share it with you today. So after that first meeting, it looked like this. It was a giant mess. Right? Like if I was making a word cloud out of the things we discussed, it looks like this. And why shouldn't it look like a big mess? After all, the committee's trying to help you navigate this world a little bit better. This volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, this is the leader's landscape that we walk, right? Where nothing's entirely certain. Because we have the knowns, we got things that we don't know, we got things that are unknowable. Right? Where very few things are very categorically good or bad. Where you can't just follow an algorithm to get the outcome you want. Everything has context and meaning, right? We have to understand the nuance to do that well. In this world depicted by that painting by David Caspar Friedrich, Thomas Sowell's words make a lot of sense, because things aren't black and white. To get a little bit more of this good thing, we have to give up a little bit of this other good thing, right? So there are no solutions, just trade-offs. So yes, this makes sense, this big mess, as they try to figure out how are we going to help you guys navigate that world a little bit better this spring. So we looked at that and we did a little analysis and we said, hey, how does this all kind of make sense? And we did this analysis, we realized, okay, around the ideas of authenticity, growth, vulnerability, we're starting to see that all those words kind of cluster around there in orbit. But the question was, are these three separate constellations, or do they all connect into one narrative that we can create? At first, they don't look like they're very well connected. But we did some more thinking, and we realized, yes, they are part of the same constellation, and that's how we'll describe it today. All right, so we'll start with authenticity, and we'll go in clockwise fashion, and we'll get to the center. So with authenticity, if you were to think, all right, what is an authentic, like close your eyes, what does an authentic leader look like to you? Probably the type of person whose audio and visual match up, right? They're consistent. When they say something, they back it up with action. They back it up with their behaviors. It's probably that type of person who, everything they do, it never feels plastic. It always just seems very genuine, like it's straight from their heart. So authentic leaders, they're able to say exactly what they mean, and they do that routinely. And they're able to do that because they know exactly who they are. And they know who they are because they have values, they understand what's worth suffering for, they know what's worth even dying for, and they've evaluated those values through the hottest fires. They've really tested them. Now, if you're sitting here and you're thinking, hey, I don't really know if I know exactly who I am, that would make a lot of sense to me. Because the psychological community, they think of it as your personality doesn't really solidify until you're about 25, right? And even then, it continues to slowly evolve, so self-awareness is kind of this continual process throughout life. But it's evolving pretty rapidly up until about 25. So if you're under 25, knowing who you are and what your personality is almost like defining the location of a moving target. Once you figured out where it is, it's kind of moved along. So if you were to say, hey, I don't really think I have that deep and penetrating self-awareness required of being an authentic leader yet, that's perfectly normal to me. But the idea is that you're continually trying to discern who exactly you are and what you value. When it comes to values, I want to point out that there's a process here. It's a process of commitment to this profession, At first you start out, plebe summer, you show up and you're in compliance. You're doing the right thing so that you can gain some sort of reward or avoid some sort of punishment. I just want the first class or the upperclassmen to lay off me, right? The thing about it is that's not good enough to be a professional, because people in compliance, they'll get away with as much as they think they can, or they'll at least try, right? So we then move on to a point where we start to become proud of the uniform we wear, what values it represents, those sorts of things, right? We're proud of what we're able to accomplish and what we're able to accomplish as part of a team, and we identify with the values. We're no longer doing it because we're trying to gain a reward or avoid a punishment, right? But we're bought in. But even that is insufficient to be a complete professional. We want to get to that level of commitment. At that level of commitment, we are doing things with the right disposition of heart. At that level of commitment, we are being good stewards of this profession. We want to leave it better than we found it. We are mindful about the processes of our team. We think, hey, can we do this a little bit better, a little bit faster, provide a better quality product at the end? This might be where you start publishing in professional journals, things like that. That's that level of commitment. And when you're there, your values align with those of the profession. So that's authenticity. And you're probably wondering, what's up below that bottom line, that bottom arrow? Well, this thing has a build, so we're going to get there, and I'm not going to tell you yet. All right, so let's go on to growth. Now, when it comes to growth, every profession is defined by three things. They need to have a body of standard knowledge. They need to have a continual education program. That's why in the fleet, you're going to go fleet, back to the schoolhouse of some sort, back to the fleet, and you'll continually grow in your professional education. And then finally, you need to have an ethos. But growth with that definition of a profession, it goes hand in glove. So when we talk about growth, we're talking about that special kind of growth, that special attitude we bring to everything that we do and try to learn, defined by Carol Dweck, growth mindset, right? You guys probably have heard this. Who's heard of that, right? Yeah, probably to ad nauseum, right? So here's what we're thinking of when we talk about growth as a professional. Professionals are hungry to improve. They always want to be better tomorrow than they are today. They have, therefore, a gratitude for their known weaknesses. I'd rather be able to define the gaps I need to cross rather than be totally unaware of where I'm weak. So they have gratitude when they're able to identify those things. They have that attitude as they approach anything that they have the capacity to change, learn, and grow. And this is all bolstered by an internal locus of control, which if you reach back into your 110 days, you might remember that internal locus of control means that you have an attitude that you can be an agent of influence, that you can shape the outcomes you wish to see in life, rather than be a victim of circumstance. So that's growth. That's growth for professionals. And again, it all ties back to something central here, a theme, but I'm not going to tell you yet. When we're talking about growth, I do want to point out one thing. Beware of the glass ceilings you might craft for yourself. So, when I talk about glass ceilings, I mean, sometimes we set our standards too low. If you set low standards, then you're always exceeding the standard, and you feel like you've arrived. You have no more room to grow. Why would you continue growing if you're always better than the standard? And when that happens, you decrease that hunger to grow. It's kind of an insidious thing, and you got to be aware of how you do that for yourself personally and how you set standards for your teams, and perhaps create glass ceilings. So it's just a cautionary tale as we talk about growth. But let's move on to vulnerability. What are we thinking of when we think of a vulnerable leader? Can anybody help me out here? Just go ahead. No hands necessary. What do you got?
They're willing to be wrong.
Willing to be wrong. And when they're wrong, what do? They cover that thing up?
Own their failures.
What is it?
Sir, own their failures.
They own those failures. And what do? What else? Come on. What you got? They correct them, and they're transparent about them, right? My students from last semester will remember a time where I forgot to bring socks to class. And I've kind of got a thing where if I've done wrong, I want to be right with my team. So if I've done wrong, I don't feel good about it until I come clean about it, right? So I showed them all, like, hey, I forgot socks. Am I any less qualified to teach this class today? They all agreed, no, just teach us the class, let's get through this. But at the end of the day, that was very human of me to forget socks one day last semester. But the best leaders I've ever seen, they don't try to put on that veneer of perfection. Because if everyone's confidence in you is that you're perfect, well, let me tell you, one day you're not going to be perfect. And if that's where their confidence is rooted, then there goes their confidence the moment that they see a chink in your armor. So vulnerable, the best leaders I've ever seen, they can't stand it. When they know they've done something wrong, they got to be right with their team, right? And so they very quickly identify that to their team, they fix it, and do all the great things that you guys were just talking about. So this is what that looks like. Vulnerable leaders are transparent, but they're transparent with purpose. There's a reason they're transparent. It's because they want to show to other people, hey, I'm a human, and you're a human too. We all have strengths and weaknesses, we all have challenges, and that's okay. By doing that, they're encouraging other people, hey, despite your challenges, I want you to reach to your full potential, right? Rather than shutting it down and being hard on yourself for the gaps that we still have. These leaders, they willingly acknowledge both their strengths and their challenges. And if I could go back to that transparent with purpose, I want to acknowledge something that the Commandant says. So he's talking about having meaning behind our words. When we're transparent, we're not just unloading things on people. When I say transparent with purpose, again, it's for that very specific purpose of helping people see that you're human and that they're okay. They can still reach higher despite their weaknesses. As the committee and I, we discussed this discussion about like incompetence and like, hey, what's oversharing kind of came up. I think it's worth mentioning. Oversharing would be just unloading with no purpose, right? Just unpacking your weaknesses and your challenges. When it comes to incompetence, I would say this stuff, it never happens when somebody's so insecure that they don't want to be transparent with their team, right? You don't see this kind of vulnerability with highly incompetent and insecure leaders. They don't have the strength of character to fail and then try again, like we're talking about when we talk about growth. And insecure people, they're afraid to say exactly what they mean and be truly authentic because they're afraid of what other people will think. So really what sits at the center of all of this is confidence. And that seems like a little like anticlimactic. It's at the same font size and color as the others. Let's go with confidence. This is what's at the center of this thing, right?
Yeah.
Who knew that already? Okay, yeah, smarty pants. All right, so confidence sits at the center of all these things. The root cause analysis of all these great attributes of leaders, authenticity, that hunger to grow continuously, the vulnerability, at the root of all that, the origin is confidence. So let's talk about that for a second. Confidence happens to be the most attractive quality in human beings. This works for dating just like it does for leadership. It's that, when I talk about confidence, I'm talking about that quiet, determined confidence. That knowledge, that quiet confidence that whatever obstacle comes down the pipeline, I'm going to find a way around it, under or over or through it. It's that self-efficacy. And nobody can just like give it to you. Self-efficacy is earned because you put yourself through trials. Sometimes you fail. It's not a direct pathway to success. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you get turned down. Sometimes you're disappointed. Sometimes you suffer real pain. But you get up and you do it again. Eventually you succeed. One day, after getting enough wins behind your back and understanding very plainly where you're strong, where your limitations are, you develop this quiet confidence that no matter what comes down the pipe, I'm going to find a way over, around, under, or through it. It's not hubris, it's not arrogance, it's confidence. How do people with self-efficacy behave? They're able to balance their confidence with humility. Again, it's understanding their limitations, understanding how little they can possibly know in a world of infinite complexity. And yet they're able to forge forward confidently, knowing, hey, I'm going to do the best I know how with the time, resources, and data I have. So again, This is the very origin of all these great qualities. And in this discussion, we've discussed 3 of what I have found typify the most successful minds in the world. We've talked about internal locus of control, we've talked about growth mindset, and we've talked about self-efficacy. I would argue that intrinsic motivation and self-authorship, those last 2 remaining ones, yeah, they're in there. We just didn't talk about them explicitly. So, like I said, the committee and I, if we were to just discuss how to create a narrative around confident leadership, it probably isn't the framing we would have come up with. But I think it's a really interesting framing nonetheless. What we've done is we've done a root cause analysis on all these things we probably aspire to as leaders and realize that they all are rooted in self-efficacy, confidence. So my message to you is it's worth investing in that. It's worth doing hard things, failing, learning, trying again, doing the iterative process to grow so that one day you can have that bold confidence that will yield authenticity. It will yield a commitment to growth. It will yield the type of vulnerable leadership that we need to inspire others to reach their potential. And if you're still wondering, like, hey, I've got a lot of room to grow here, how am I ever going to do it? Don't worry, just take it one step at a time. And I'll tell you, my dad just turned 81 recently. He once told me, life is like a helicopter. And then he followed up with, I have no idea how a helicopter works. I appreciate you guys coming out today. I hope that by spending a little bit of time with me, you understand this way of framing confidence, and you understand how this helicopter works a little bit better. What are your questions? We do have time for questions. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Mr. Foster with the company. As you said before, confidence in a big part is shaped by going through experiences, failing, and trying again. But how is someone, because in life, some people, I would say, receive a disproportionate high amount of failures. Like there are some people just seem like they just go through really hard stuff, and it sometimes just seems to always kind of wrong. If that's you, how are you supposed to gain confidence?
That's a great question. And we met in the O course this last spring. All right. So the question was, if you're one of those people that feels like you experience disproportionately large number of failures, how will you gain confidence? Well, what does Jocko say about failure? Good. Yeah, that's right. Good. Because the way we can confidently navigate is by having a very clear-eyed view of where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, where our limitations on capacity and everything are, right? And whenever we fail, there's a lot to be learned from that, right? It has shown us a couple of things. One, hey, I got a gap to fill here. So I've found the boundary of my limitations. It also tells us whatever I did to lead to that failure, it's a data point. Didn't work. Try it differently, right? So the more failures you have, the better and more clear-eyed view you have of that, right? And that in and of itself will be reason for confidence, because okay, when I go into something else, I know very clearly where my limitations are, what I can be confident in employing as far as strengths, and where I need to exercise caution, right? Now, the other piece of failing a lot, and maybe if you feel like you're failing a lot, let me just give you a little glimpse into your futures. You will never live in such a high concentration of exceptional performers in the rest of your life, right? You all have the same address as 4,000 people who are just absolutely exceptional. And it's tough to keep sight of that when you're in and around them every single day. So if you're feeling like you're one of those people that's failing a lot here, just a little bit of perspective is you're performing very, very, very well, with respect to the rest of the population. So please don't. I know it can be kind of alluring to go down that path of hey, I keep failing, I keep falling short of my expectations. It's probably because you guys have set expectations that are always just slightly out of reach. That is a attribute of the highest performers in the world. So good. Keep setting those high standards, but don't let it affect your confidence. Is that fair? Yeah. All right, probably have time for two more. Anyone got a burner? What do you got?
Good afternoon, sir. Fourth class Rosen, 22nd grade. Failure is often described as a great teacher for growth. However, failures can have real consequences that set up massive barriers. How do you get past those consequences and barriers and try to stay stoic, or at least get something out of this?
You don't think I was ready for this? I wrote a book on leadership. Hey, one thing that we continually fail to do is accurately and constructively interpret failure, right? When we carry failure as a burden, it's because probably we haven't seen it for what it is, and we haven't used it as a platform to stand on and achieve higher results the next time, right? So typically when it feels like it's over, when it feels like there's real consequences here, we need to take a zoom out, right, and see it with broader perspective. That the story's not over yet, and in the words of Nelson Mandela, I never fail, I either win or learn. Or I never lose, I either win or learn, right? So, are you with me so far? Okay. Is there anything that's not convincing about that answer?
Sounds a bit too optimistic, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Are you willing to say where the gaps are?
I'm asking about failure when it really, honest to goodness, is over. How do you bounce back? Because nobody's going to fail like that as they have.
Like even like when death's on the line? The way I see it, you got to be able to do your future self favors by doing everything you can today to control the controllables, right? So if I know that I've got a goal in mind, even if it's some far distant thing, like, hey, you're an officer candidate, and one day you might be leading in combat, right? If you know that you've done everything you knew how with the resources and time you had between now and when that trial comes to fruition, then you can look yourself in the mirror on the other end of that, even in the spite of failure, and say, I know I couldn't determine the outcomes, but I influenced it in every way I possibly could. If you live your life that way, then you can remove that guilt. If you live your life that way, then you're doing your future self favors when you have to take that look in the mirror, even in the face of failure, and say, yes, I did everything I possibly could between now and when the trial came to fruition to be successful. We have to be comfortable with the fact that we can lean over the line. There's things within our control firmly. There's things that we can influence, but then there's outcomes that we can't perfectly determine. The Stoics modeled this with an archer, right? That archer can choose the time spent practicing, the quality of their practice, their intentionality during the practice, and choose the quality of their bow, quality of their arrows, their point of aim, the precise moment that they release the arrow. But what they can't control is, once that arrow is released, is there a gust of wind that shifts the target? Does a bird come down and pluck that thing out of the sky? Anything like that. We can influence every little last bit that's within our control and the things that we can influence. We can lean over that line, but we can't perfectly determine outcomes. We have to come to a level of comfort with that. Fair? Okay. One more. Claire. I hope to never know what that's like. And here's the thing. Out of all those things we discussed, some of these things are choices, right? I just messed it up. Bear with me. Let's take this one for example. Out of these, which ones can we perfectly control? To say what you mean, right? Now, knowing who you are, as we discussed, that's kind of like it's a function of age. You know, it's a function of like how well can you discern who you truly are. The values are a part of that process too. Got it. So can't perfectly control those things. We should be intentional about understanding those things, and that'll come. But the only thing that we can perfectly control is saying exactly what we mean. And if you decide on that, even when it takes a lot of moral courage to say things that are maybe unpopular, maybe it goes against what your boss thinks, things like that, do it anyway. And sometimes you'll be wrong when you do that. That's not failing your team. That's just being wrong. That's just having a bad set of data, bad interpretation. Those things are human. People will forgive you for that, right? But they won't forgive you for knowingly messing something like that up, something that's controllable, being completely honest and transparent with them. Does that make sense? So that's a personal commitment you guys can make. All right. I gotta say, since we're running out of time here, it has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you. Again, I hope that you guys got something out of it, and I hope you'll attend the rest of the lecture series leading up to the spring. Thanks to the committee. Thank you all.